Hello, how are you this afternoon? My name is Waidaka, and I want to welcome you to this live stream where we're discussing quite a number of topics in the architectural field. Today we'll be dealing with trying to look at concepts that are related to history of architecture, which is a very important course in the history of making an architect, and therefore we'll be looking at a number of concepts or a number of topics in history of architecture. And therefore, I want to welcome you to this live stream. You can continue engaging me on the comment section. If you have a question, if you have a comment to make, just engage me through the comment section. Having said that, again, I would wish also to let you know that we are streaming live through the technical training channel, and this is a channel that deals or is involved in generating content that is related to educational content and more so in the courses or units that are in the construction industry. So we make videos on a regular basis related to topics related to various situations, various problems within the construction field, just to enlighten our subscribers and all those people who are streaming through our who are engaging us through the live stream. Therefore, this is a channel that I wish to invite you to subscribe if you are not one of our subscribers. Share your thoughts with us on the content that we've already uploaded on the channel so that we'll be able to respond more on the issues that you will raise. Therefore, as we start this session on history of architecture, we'll continue engaging. If you have any question, if you have any comments, just post it on the comment section. So in our today live stream, we'll be dealing with a number of topics. One of them is contextual meaning in architecture, and we look at a number of factors, a number of forces that influence architecture of a given community. Then we will go through and look at concepts that are related to Egyptian architecture. And finally, if time allows us, because we are streaming for about 2 hours, we'll also look at concepts that are related to the Greek architecture. So therefore, I want to welcome you, engage us in this session. If you have any question, as I've said, just post it in our comment section, and we'll be able to respond to it as we move on. Therefore, let me share my screen with you so that we are able to see the content that we are discussing today. We are able to see the various issues that we want to discuss and elaborate in this session. Therefore, welcome, and let us begin. So I'm sharing my screen. I hope you are able to see the content that we'll be discussing today. That is culture and the built form. And actually, we want to look at the context of the built form with respect to a number of factors. But maybe before we look at the various forces that influence architecture of a given society, let us define or look at what architecture is and how we can define architecture. And we are saying that architecture can be defined as an act of enclosing and organizing space for human purpose, and that is the basic principle behind designs in architecture. We are just trying to organize space trying to enclose space for human purpose. This would basically be in accordance to some guidance or inference of some parameters, often characteristic to a particular locality and a people. So anytime an architect is doing some piece of work, is designing an architectural project, they will always be guided by some parameters which are characteristic of an individual, developer, a locality, or a people in a given society. Therefore, this guidance or response gives it both meaning and relevance within that particular context. And we are saying that some of the forces which also contribute to the development of architecture in a given society will vary from a number of factors, a number of issues, and some of those forces would include one of them would be just a minute. One of them would be cultural force, and we are saying that culture refers to a people's way of life, that is mannerism and intellectual values. Human behaviors, values, and beliefs also influence the perception of space and form. So actually, under cultural form, we are saying that a culture of a given people or a given society will influence how a designer would look at a design, how they would approach design, because culture is very key when we come to designing, and it will always influence the way architecture is carried out, or how designers go through their business of designing buildings. So we are saying that, for example, people may have preference for circular forms, dome, square, etc., due to certain symbolic meaning or interpretation. So if a certain culture uh, gives more weight to a particular form, either say a dome, a square, a circular form, that will influence the way an architect looks at the design and the way he interprets uh, the various concepts within the design process. Therefore, we are also saying that space, size, and volume may also be determined directly by the way of life. If their world is externally oriented, e.g., houses may be small in size since maybe they only need them for sleeping in. So culture will also influence the space required for a particular design, depending on the cultural background of a certain community. Space size, if a community does not require uh, a facility for living in, for staying throughout the day, then you just need small, you try small spaces, you come sleep and woke up in the following day to attend to their duties. And this is more so evident within the pastoralist communities, where they only need a small house to live in. But for those people who maybe are waiting for their crops to mature for 6, 7 months, then the typology of their designs will change. So that's how culture influences architecture of a given society, and any designer will have to look at culture. Another force is the sociological force, and we are saying that this force deals with how people interact and relate within the community, where the community could be defined as an organized group consisting of individuals sharing common set of beliefs. So the way a community interacts, the way they live together, that will influence architecture. And we are saying that within such groups, there exists certain social order which gives relationship between the group members according to, say, sex, age, clan, occupation, etc. So these are factors that will influence architecture at any one particular time, depending with the context that a designer is designing in. Sex, age, clan, occupation will always influence architecture. They're also saying that this reflects in spatial organization, e.g., in Islamic communities, they have strict guidelines on how the sexes interact, and therefore their spatial order are always such that each sex operates in their own zones, and common spaces occur only when interaction is socially accepted. So the Islamic community is a very good example of how sociological factors influence architecture, in that they define how the sexes interact, how the male and the female interact within their setup, within their designs, within their properties, within their buildings. They will always define that, and we are saying that they only allow interaction when it's socially acceptable, and they will provide, and any designer who is designing for this community will have to ensure that he provides for that aspect. That's how a sociological factor affects architecture. And then we also look at another factor, that is the economic factor. And we are saying that economic forces or economic factor will deal with the occupation of the people. For example, farming community would have difference in their spatial approach to nomadic communities. So in the economic factor is a very key aspect in design, or is a key force that influences how architecture is approached in a given society. A community that is a farming community will definitely have a different spatial organization. The way they organize their spaces will be totally different from how a nomadic community would approach their spatial organization. So you are saying that the spatial organization of a farming community would be different, in that they will need, say, e.g., stores for their products, and their building would tend to be more permanent since they have to be around as the crops grow. So this is a difference between, or a comparison between, a nomadic community and a farming community. A farming community will always require space, more permanent building compared to a nomadic community. And that's how economic force influences architecture. Then we have technological force, and under technological force, we are looking at how materials and technology advancement, how it determines how architecture is looked at, or how it is addressed within a given community. So we are saying that materials needed for technological advancement determine the type and size of structures achievable. We are also saying that in places where abundance of rocks, the buildings will be developed out of stones. In forested areas, it will be done out of timber, and actually in Arctic Circle, they will be done out of snow. And this is just an example of how materials and technology would influence architecture of a given society. If you look at the Egyptian and the Greeks, they preferred the art of building with stones due to availability, to the availability of the stones, and hence could build larger and more permanent buildings than the traditional African house form. So Egyptians and Greek were more advanced as compared to to the rest of the Africans, because for them they were able to employ the art of cutting stone, and they will be able to come up with more permanent buildings than the rest of Africa. Also, Greek took the same concepts, and we will be looking at these two architectural languages in depth, so that we see how their architecture, how their ancient language of architecture was conceived. And when you talk of technology, it goes hand in hand with materials that are there. The materials inform maybe the technology that will be used. Then the other force is the environmental force, and we are saying that this mostly refers to climatic forces which probably influence a particular attitude towards a built form. And one of the basic functional performance of a building is to provide shelter from the forces of nature, and the form adapted in any particular locality would be one that or one which does this best. So environmental forces will always influence architecture of a given society. If a designer is doing a building in an arid area, it will be totally different from how a designer would conceive the same building in a region where the climates are very severe, or they are very or a cold place. It will be different. The organization of space, the utilization of material, the concept, the technology behind construction would be different, and therefore environmental forces are very key in how buildings are conceived within a particular society. We are saying that in places of where there is low rainfall and high temperatures, the house would have thick walls to provide thermal insulation, and probably flat roofs, because the rainfall is there is low rainfall. Therefore, a flat roof will do. But in areas where we have high rainfall, cold or low temperatures, then the design changes, and becomes almost the opposite of a low rainfall area with high temperatures. So again, environmental force is key on how we design, how we look at the roof pitches and the rest, depending on the environmental force. Then those are the forces that are there. They are not the only one. We could also look at other forces and see how they influence architecture of a given society. But before we wind up, it's important we look at what is known as the functionality of space or building. And we are saying that functionality can simply be explained as the performance of a building, or its relevance within its unique context, and how well it responds to its contextual forces. So functionality uh, is how well a building performs within its context, within the various forces that are within uh, the context where that building is being designed for. So you're also saying that in summary, it includes the spatial relationship, material performance, and aesthetic. So when we talk of functionality of a building, we are majorly looking at how space interacts within that building, how spatial relationship or spatial organization, how are the spaces organized? How are they relating with each other? Are they functioning well? So that is what that is what is known as spatial interrelationship. We are also talking of material performance, and we are saying under material performance, this would include the structural qualities, durability, aesthetics, etc. So material again is very important when you are looking at functionality of a building, because if the material chosen for a particular building is not functional, then that building generally it's not its functionality is not good. Then finally, we also have we are also saying that as we look at functionality, aesthetics are key, and they will also contribute to how functional a building is. And when we refer to aesthetics, we are just saying that this is a concept of beauty or image that a building portrays. So the image or the beauty that a building portrays, depending with its design, the form, material use, how they've integrated different materials to bring out the aesthetics of a building, that is basically the image that you are talking about. And if a building is able to respond in terms of aesthetics, then it contributes to functionality of the building. So we are also saying that aesthetics will deal with the ability of the building to evoke emotions, response, and this depends on a number of interrelated factors, e.g., promotion, color, form used, environmental setting, uh, etc. So these are some of the parameters that will inform aesthetics. The proportions that are used within a building in terms of the form, circular shapes, rectangular shapes, elliptical shapes, all of them will contribute to aesthetics of a building. Color, form used, environmental setting, etc. All those will inform how one looks at a building and generally the functionality of a building. But when we talk of functionality of a space, then we would look at a space and relate it to the various uh, activities that are supposed to be housed in that space. If it's a kitchen, is it functioning? Are the three functions of a kitchen working well? That is washing, cooking, preparing. Are they working well in that triangle? So that we are able to say that that space is functional, and of course not ignoring the aspect of how uh, the openings are done in a particular space, because they majorly influence how the usable space uh, within a specific room. So that is functionality of space and building, and we've looked at the various forces that influence architecture of a given society. So from here we want to move on and look at the architecture of Egyptian and see the various concepts that are related to Egyptian architecture. But this is important to first understand the various forces that influence architecture of a given society. And therefore, as we switch to the next area, that is Egyptian architecture, let's see whether there are any comments that we need to respond to, so that as we move on, we move together. So if you have any comment, just post it in my comment section, and I will be able to respond in a while. So far I can't see any comments, any question. So I just hope that we are well and we are following well. But it's important that just post me a comment so that I know that we are proceeding well before as we move on to the next topic. So I'm sharing the next area. We are discussing the Egyptian architecture, and we want to see or to see the various concepts behind Egyptian architecture. So therefore, let me just share the slides so that we follow the concepts in Egyptian architecture. So Egyptian architecture, and we are saying that Egyptian architecture development dates back to the year 3000 BC. And since the Egyptians were in close contact with Mesopotamia civilization, its architecture is linked and related to people which dates back even earlier to the Babylon and the Syrian era. And just to get a feel of how the architecture of Egyptian is organized, we are saying that their culture and development is identified majorly in three phases. That is the Old Kingdom, 3000 to 2181 BC, the Middle Kingdom, 2133 to 1786 BC, and the New Kingdom, that is 304 to 30 BC. And these three phases are very important because as we move on and as we're looking at the various buildings of importances, building of importance in Egyptian architecture, we will see the ones that were done in the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. So let us also look at how Egyptian social and political structure was organized. And we are saying that for the Egyptian, they had a very, very rigid structure, that is both social and political structure. And we are saying that the supreme rulers for the Egyptians were the pharaohs, who were associated with the gods. Then under the pharaohs, or then those who followed were the priests, and then the rest of the people would fall below the pharaohs and the priests. We are also noting that the priests were very, very powerful since they had the power of knowledge. They were educated and they were able to to advise the pharaohs of that time. So they were very important, and they were the ones that were second in that pyramid, because you know the pharaohs were very few, the priests again were not many, and then the rest of the congregation, the rest of the people would fall on the lower pyramid of the Egyptian socio-political structure, just as we'll see in a structure. Is a pyramid form, or their socio-political structure is actually in a pyramid format, where at the top we have the pharaohs, and then at the middle we have the priests, and at the bottom we have the rest of the people, the rest of the people. So the pharaohs comes at the top, priests at the middle, and the rest of the people would fall on the lower part of the pyramid. And that is how their socio-political structure is. And then we can look at again the climatical factor within the Egyptian architecture. So we are saying that Egypt is basically located in a desert environment, and their life totally depends on the Nile in terms of economic, social, and religious function. So as we move on, we'll see how Nile impacts the the people or the architecture of the Egyptians, and how Nile is key to their economic, their social, and even their religious function. And for them, the Nile was a symbol of security and life. And this is a concept that is that is there even to date, because anytime there are matters related to the Nile, then that becomes quite pertinent to the Egyptian authority, to the Egyptian people, because basically spells out how their lives would look like, and that is basically the same even in the early architecture, because we are looking at the historical background of architecture, and Egyptian architecture gives us a very good basis of how architecture, architectural concepts, even the ones that are being employed today, came to play in as time went by. So therefore, that is how the climatical conditions for the Egyptians. It's good to understand their setup is in a desert environment, so that even anytime you are looking at the ancient buildings that were done at that early time, you are able to understand why, you are able to contextualize the reason why those buildings were done the way they were done and the way they were designed. Then again, we also look at materials and technology. Under materials and technology, we are saying that in Egypt, they boast of abundance of good building stones. And again, they also had good mastery of the art of cutting stones for building. These two aspects were very key to them, and it enabled them to do buildings that were quite big, that buildings that were quite strong, and ones that would be durable, because you are combining the art of cutting stones and again the uh, the availability of abundance building stones. So we are also saying that they preferred cubical units, which allowed for largeness of scale. And as we will see as we move on, especially if you look at the architecture of the Egyptian architecture around the pyramids, then this point becomes very, very crucial, because you are saying that they preferred cubical units, which allowed for largeness of scale, and due to that concept of largeness of scale, they were able to do very huge buildings that were able to last for a very, very long time. Then we're also saying that sun-dried bricks and wood was also used, particularly for domestic architecture, while the more durable stones were preserved for the temples and tombs. So again, it's very important for us to understand that the Egyptian cultural and religious beliefs impacted quite a lot on the way they conceived the architecture, because like we are saying that for the normal dwelling units, the normal day-to-day dwelling units, they would just do them with sun-dried bricks and wood. So they never considered them to be building of importance. They were there for just a short while, because for them, life after death was very, very, very important, and they put more emphasis on life after death, and that's why you find that the temples that were done by pharaohs to be buried there, or tombs that were done at that particular time, they were done from durable stones, because they believed life after death was more important than the normal life that they would live when they were alive. And therefore, that's why they would ensure that the temples and tombs at that time were done from durable stones, for the sake of fulfilling that religious and cultural aspect. They also made use of wall columns as architectural elements. So in Egyptian, that is where we are first seeing the concept of columns, the concept of beams, because for them they were able to do columns by stacking stones on top of each other, and they would achieve a column, and then they would look for big stones that would span from one column to the other. But of course, due to lack of stones that were large in size, they were not able to get very big stones that would span big distances, and therefore the they would employ what we call triatic principle of construction. Triatic principle of construction is basically where you'd have so many columns that are closely packed together, and then we have beams of stones spanning from one column to the other. And we are saying that this concept also brought in the concept of hypostyle construction, where we would have the central part of a building raised up, and we'd have aisles on the sides of that building to basically demonstrate how that concept of triadic principle came about. Then we also look at symbolism and meaning of architecture, of Egyptian architecture. And we are saying that the life of Egyptian revolved around natural elements, which also dictated it, and that is the sun, desert, and the Nile. So for Egyptians, their life revolved around the natural elements, and they dictated how they went about their businesses, both in terms of architecture, in terms of their religious functions, in terms of the cultural functions, and that is we are talking of the sun, the desert, and the Nile. And we are saying that such elements were central in their thoughts, and their primary goals therefore represented natural elements or aspects which were embodied through analogy with human and animal property, that is personification. So Egyptian, they had so many gods that were responsible for different concepts, because you are saying for them they were more their life revolved more on the natural elements, and they would attach or they would have so many gods that were attached to particular concept, or they would represent particular elements within their context. So we are saying that this aspect of personification enabled them to understand the basic relationship between the elements of nature, for example, fertility and aridity, or other abstract aspects, that is good and evil. So for them, they would interpret fertility and aridity, or they would be able to understand the basic relationship of the interaction between the aridity and the fertility of their land by uh, personifying that and attaching those aspects to a particular god, and as we will see, and they would go do their rituals to a particular god for the sake of maybe rain, for the sake of fertility of their land, and so forth. Some of the gods that would point out at that particular time is like Ra, that is would mean the god that was sun god, Atom, god of creation, Shu, god of air, all the way. And we will see even, especially how Amun-Re, king of gods, would really impact their life and the rituals that they were carrying out in their day-to-day life, their cultural concepts, their cultural aspects, their religious aspect. We will see how even these gods impacted on how the buildings that were done at that particular time uh, were done and were designed. So we are also saying that the behavior and interaction of these natural elements influenced their approach to architecture, e.g., the predictability of the seasons, rain, and the regular rise of the Nile influenced them into having preference for highly ordered and formalized spaces. So you're saying in Egyptian, the reason as to why their spaces were so formal and orderly is a concept that was derived from the predictability of their seasons. That is, the rains, when the rains would come, and when the Nile would rise due to the influence of rain. So that was interpreted in their spatial organization to ensure that they had very highly formalized and highly ordered uh, relationships. Then the other thing is that the permanent rhythm, or the permanent rhythm of the rise and the fall of the Nile, compounded by their daily routine. Constant interaction of the Nile and the sun created the necessity of interpreting time as a as an eternal rhythm within basically static order. So the rhythm between the Nile and the sun, because of course the Nile and the sun interacts in an axis, north, south, east, east, west, then that uh, also was interpreted within the context of their design, ensuring that they also employed that concept of interaction between the sun and the Nile. That is which basically mean it's known as orthogonal order, and we'll see that concept when we come to a number. We'll be looking at a number of characteristics of Egyptian architecture. So orthogonal order is a concept of interpreting the relationship between the Nile and the sun, where would derive angles of 90 degrees, and you find that most of their buildings, their walls were interacting at angles of 90 degrees, which is a concept that was derived from the interaction of the sun and the Nile. So then again, when we look at the various characteristics that would define Egyptian architecture, and we are saying that one of them is axiality. When we talk of axiality, we are basically saying this was a reflection of the Nile, which in itself was an access to the Egyptian country. So axiality is the concept of an axis. And you are saying that for them, they looked at Nile as an axis that split their country into two. That split their country into two. Uh, then we have enclosure as another characteristic of how they looked at their buildings. And when we talk of axiality, we basically interpreted in architectural concept to basically mean that most of their buildings were done or were generated from an axis. So you would see an axis through the designs, through the buildings that were done at that particular time, and what would now happen to the left is the same that would happen to the right. So you definitely see the concept or the characteristic of an axis in the designs. Then under enclosure, we are saying that this was a reaction to the harsh desert environment, a reflection of the idea of a building of building around an oasis. So enclosure, we are saying that is a concept or a characteristic where, due to the harsh desert condition, the harsh climatic conditions, they would do a building that uh, would focus on would be internally oriented, and that's where the courtyard concept came from. An aspect or a concept that like you're building around an oasis, and therefore you would conceive that building like it's rocking the rest of the harsh climatic conditions outside and concentrating within the oasis, and all the amenities would be housed, or all the spaces would be oriented to the courtyard. So that is enclosure. Then we also have durable megalithic mass as another characteristic of the Egyptian architecture. When we talk of durable megalithic mass, we are basically saying that they employed uh, materials that were huge and were very durable. As we saw before, we said that they had abundance of building stones, and that's why they were able we are picking these as a characteristic of the architecture. And the way the stones were employed, they were of huge masses, and therefore, at the end of the day, their buildings were meant to last for forever. They were meant to be permanent, uh, and hence the use of the durable megalithic masses. Then we also have another characteristic, that is orthogonal order. And just as I had indicated earlier, this was based on right angles, a relationship derived from the Nile-Sun interaction. So that interaction between the Nile and the Sun gave them the concept of orthogonal order, and interpreted in their buildings, uh, designing buildings that were the walls were interacting at angles of 90 degrees. So those are four major characteristics of Egyptian architecture. We talked of axiality, we've talked of enclosure, and then now we've seen durable megalithic mass and the orthogonal order. Then we move forward and look at the various buildings of importance that were done in Egypt at that ancient time. So, under buildings of importance, we are saying that from the symbolism of meaning of the architecture, the most important of their buildings are those that depicted their culture, their cultural belief, and values. That is, nature, which was synonymous with God, and life after death. So when we look at a number of buildings that were done at that ancient time, and you are saying that they would be influenced by cultural beliefs and their values, and more so the aspect or the cultural belief that life after death was more important than people who are actually alive, and we will see that concept being quite clearly demonstrated, or that cultural aspect being demonstrated within the various buildings that were done at that particular time. So the temples and tombs were conceived to be very permanent buildings, and those ones are the ones that were done with stones. And then we are saying that dwellings were made of less durable materials due to that aspect, or that cultural aspect of life after death being more important than the normal daily life when people are living. Then one of the building of importance in Egyptian architecture is what we call as the tombs. And you are saying that in the Old Kingdom, tombs took the form of either caves cut out of the rocky ridges of the Nile Valley, or the mastabas. So tombs were either caves that were cut in the rocky ridges of the Nile, or what are basically known as the mastabas. We're also saying that due to the belief in life after death, the tombs were kind of complete dwelling units consisting of burial chambers where the mummified corpses were laid, a room of offering service, sacrifice, and other additional rooms depending on the wealth of the rulers. So at that old time, at that old stage uh, of architectural typologies within the Egyptian architecture, we are saying that caves were done especially for the kings, or those who are well up within the community, the pharaohs and the priests. And we are saying that a cave was a unit that consisted a number of spaces, like we had the burial chambers, we had the rooms for offering sacrifices, and additional rooms depending with the wealth of the one who is being buried in the caves. The common people, or those who are in the lower level of the pyramid, their socio-political pyramid, were buried in mastabas. And mastabas was just a building that was done out of sun-dried bricks, uh, and that's where those people who are not well up within the society were basically buried. And we can see even the caves, we are talking of a room for offering sacrifices, uh, because they believed in life after death. We are also saying that the mastabas were built of sun-dried bricks, elongated in shape with a flat top and a sloping side. So mastaba was done out of sun-dried bricks. It had it was elongated in shape, uh, and had a flat top. The sides were sloping and had a flat top. The burial chamber within the mastaba was done below the superstructure. So we had a room that was done below the mastaba, and we also had other spaces like the treasury room within the mastaba. Then we're also noting that many of these caves and whatever, and the mastabas were found at Saqqara and Giza in the lower Egypt. Then, as time went by, especially in the Middle Kingdom, the kings began building the pyramids. Uh, but of course, the other people continued to be buried within the mastabas, and mastaba construction tradition also went on. But the king now evolved from the caves and they started doing the pyramids. We are saying that the first pyramid was made by architect Imhotep for King Zosa in the third dynasty, and uh, it was a stepped pyramid and actually had been derived from stacking six mastabas in descending in size on top of each other. So we had uh, six mastabas. Remember, we said mastaba was elongated in shape, where the sides were sloping, and for this designer to conceive the first pyramid was a concept that was derived by stacking six mastabas on top of each other, decreasing in size. These were at Saqqara, and around it were buildings destined to support the ruler afterlife, and the whole complex was enclosed within a boundary. So we are saying a king would be buried in that pyramid, would also be be supported, or other buildings would be done around that pyramid to ensure support, or to give support to the king who has died. Again, we are saying that the first time a pyramid with four flat triangular surfaces meeting at the apex was built at the fourth dynasty. And the most famous pyramids are three at Giza, with Cheops building the Great Pyramid that was about 137 meters high, with a base length of 228.5 meters. So they were huge buildings, because we are talking of 228 meters pyramid with a height of 137 meters high. So they are very huge buildings that are done out of stones to ensure that they lasted the test of time. So we are saying that Cheops built the greatest one uh, that was had a base length of 228 and a height of 137 meters. Then Chephrem built the second largest, 136 meters high, with a base length of 210 millimeters. And finally, Miscellaneous did the smallest, 62.2 meters high, and a base of 103 meters. Then again, it's also important to note that it's only in Cheops is the burial chamber within the superstructure ascended through a gallery lined with high quality limestone. So the burial chamber within the Cheops uh, pyramid is actually within the superstructure. It's not below the ground, it's within the superstructure and is accessed through a gallery of steps that are lined with quality limestone. Then again, we look at or we see that in the Middle Kingdom, pyramids were built with less care and appeared as ungainly masses lacking the clarity of line and precision of, uh, of the Great Pyramid. So as time went by, as uh, technology evolved, the aspect or the concept of building a pyramid for the pharaohs to be buried within those pyramids went on dying little by little. And by the time in the New Kingdom, the pharaohs were buried at Dems, by then the religious city of Egypt, and caves cut deep into the limestone cliff in the valleys of King. And these caves were more of temple-like, as we will see examples of temples that were done or cut along the rocky ridges of the Nile. Then the other building of importance, we've looked at first one, that is the tomb. Then we look at the temples, and we are saying that temples were simply architectural expression of the Egyptians' complex religious life. Most of them consisted of huge courtyards, coronated halls, and sanctuary for the various ceremonies and festivals. Major temple architecture rise between the New Kingdom and the Roman period, as we will see those periods between the Roman, the Greek, and the Egyptians. We will see how the architecture, or historically how the architecture evolved within those three major periods. So again, we are saying that at this time, Thames was the religious center, especially for the cult of Amun-Re, king of God, and there were two temples dedicated to him on the eastern Nile bank. Among them is Karnak, is the temple of Karnak. So we are saying that at this time, the king started building the temples, and that's where they were being buried. And these temples, again, others were dedicated to various gods, and they were used to perform various rituals and various cultural functions. Especially, we are looking at the Amun-Re, the king of gods, and you see temples that were done were dedicated to him. And we are saying that one of these temple that was situated in the eastern Nile bank is known as the temple the temple, the Amun-Re, Temple of Amun-Re at Karnak, and you'll see how it was conceived. So that is just an introductory bit about the temples, and now we can look at a number of the temples that we had done at this particular time in the ancient Egyptian architecture. So one of these temples, as I had said earlier, is the Temple of Amun-Re at Karnak, and we will see a number of points or a number of factors, a number of aspects that are related to the temple of Amun-Re. So one, we are saying that it is approached from the riverside quay through a processional way lined with ram-handed sphinxes symbolizing Amun-Re. So from the Nile, so the approach of this temple is from the river Nile, and we have a processional way that is lined with ram-headed sphinxes. These are just sculptural effects that were arranged around the processional way towards the entrance of this temple, and these sphinxes were symbolizing the king, or they were done with the symbol of the Amun-Re. We are saying that the entrance consists of two massive towers flanking the gateway, and the columns were consistently the columns that were done within this temple. Remember, we talked of the triadic principle of construction, where they would do so many columns and then they would put large stones spanning between one column to the other. And this is the same concept that is being brought in within this temple, because we are saying that columns were consistently used, arranged chiefly in the east-west axis and the north-south axis. So we are bringing in the concept of triadic principle, where you are using many columns to ensure that we have beams of stone spanning on the columns. And again, we are bringing the characteristic of orthogonal order, because we are saying that these columns were chiefly arranged in the east-west axis and the north-south axis. The interaction we talked about earlier between the Nile and the sun. Again, we are saying that around the east-west axis is the Great Hypostyle Hall, a major architectural feature of the ancient Egypt. It consists of 134 columns, which supported the roof, and light filtered through small grilled windows at the top. So the hypostyle hall construction aspect is where we are saying that the central part of the temple is raised, and then we have the sides. We have aisles on the sides at a lower level, and then we would have grills of the windows filtering from the hypostyle hall, or the raised part of that building. Then we're also saying that it had a central nave which had 12 columns, which were about 19.5 meters high, and the capital, or the topmost part of those columns would be designed to resemble open papyrus umbel. It's a flower in Egypt, and other capitals would imitate a crossed band of a flower. We'll also be looking at the various columns that were utilized by the Egyptian at that particular time, and then we will be able to understand how these columns were conceived, and the aspect of their capital. The capital is the topmost part of the column, how they were designed to resemble papyrus umbel and others imitating crossed bands of maybe a flower. Then we also saying that the temple had halls for special ceremonies and celebrations, especially because we are saying this is a temple that was dedicated to the King of Gods, that is Amun-Re. Therefore, we would have there was a number of halls within this temple for different or for special ceremonies and celebration. Then another temple is what we call the funerary temples. These were temples that were constructed by pharaohs to emphasize their relationship with Amun-Re and keep their names alive. That is, as a monument, these were particularly built in the New Kingdom. So funerary temples, they were done by pharaohs to emphasize their relationship between them and the Amun-Re. And we are saying that were particularly done within the New Kingdom. So you're also saying that the image of Amun-Re of Karnak was ferried across the Nile to visit the temples during certain ceremonies, e.g., the Feast of the Valley. Most of these were concentrated at the west bank of the Nile. So remember, we talked of the Nile and we said Nile is key and quite central into the life of the Egyptians. And you can see how even at that ancient time, the Nile is impacting on the life of the Egyptians, even with regard to the architecture. So the image of Amun-Re of Karnak would be ferried across the Nile to visit the temples during certain ceremonies. Remember, the funerary temples were done by kings. Most of them were buried in those temples. They were done as to even as monument to remember the various kings, and that's why we have now the image of Amun-Re visiting the various temples that were done at that particular time. So we are saying an example is the funerary temple that was done by Queen Hatshepsut in 18th dynasty, who built it across a cliff. Other temples that were done at that particular time are what we call the sandstone temples. At Absimbel, there are two in number. You're saying that these temples were carved from sandstone mountains or cliffs, and the facade of the Raja temple consists of four-seated statues of Ramses II, Pharaoh Ramses II. So one of the temple was done by for this Pharaoh Ramses II, and it consists. We are saying that the Raja temple consists of four-seated statues of Pharaoh Ramses II. The hypostyle hall had 8 columns, which were square-faced, with statues of Pharaoh Ramses II as the god of underworld, and the sanctuary, that is the inner room, contains of statues of the four gods worshipped at that temple, and one of the gods is Re-Horangte. We have Amun-Re, king of gods. We have now Ramses II, and we have Ta, that is creator of Memphis. Memphis. So this temple is just again elaborating on how the temple of Amun-Re was related to the rest of the temples. Because you can see even within this temple, the image of Amun-Re is again featuring within this temple. We're also saying that this temple, the temple axis, is oriented in such that twice a year during equinox, threshing sun penetrates the entire length of the temple, 55 meters to the sanctuary. And you can see the temples again were huge buildings, because we are talking of a building that has about a length of 55 meters. So there were huge buildings that were done at that particular time. And you are saying, like, for these temples, that they were oriented in such a way that twice a year during equinox, the threshing side will penetrate the entire length. So again, uh, that's another aspect within these temples of the sandstone temples at Absibe. So those are important buildings within the Egyptian architecture. We've talked of the temples and the tombs. So as we wind up with the Egyptian architecture, again we look at how their domestic architecture was organized, because it would only be fair, again, we would discuss and see how the domestic architecture was done. And we are saying that the houses were built of sun-dried bricks and wood, just as I had said before. That was for the basic, or the people, the common people in the Lower Kada, and they also lived in huts. But for the well-up community, for those who are a little bit rich, their houses were done with an entrance porch that led to an adjoining vestibule with a row of columns. So we had an entrance porch, and then it would take you to another space where we had was done by a row of columns. And this led to the hypostyle hall, either square or rectangle. Because remember, we talked of the hypostyle hall, so where you are raising the central part of the building, and you have aisles surrounding the building. For this case, it would be either a square or a rectangle. We are also saying that these houses were organized systematically on an axis, and this brings us again to our first characteristics, where we talked of axiality, the way Nile reflects within their country as an axis through their country. So we are seeing it being interpreted even in their domestic architecture, where we are saying that the designs were organized on an axis, and all the necessary spaces, e.g. bedroom, servant quarter, storage, were laid out on either side, and they were all contained within the large rectangular. So again, we are saying that many houses had a second story, which sometimes also contained a terrace, and the whole house was whitewashed inside and outside. And of course, the interiors were decorated with paintings on the walls, ceiling, and colored floors. So that's how the Egyptian domestic architecture was conceived, and that would generally bring us into to the end of the Egyptian architecture and concepts that are related to the Egyptian architecture. So again, before we look at our final bit, that is the Roman, not that is the Greek architecture. Again, let me just pull this screen down so that I check whether there are comments that require to be addressed or to respond to before we move to our final topic of the day, that is Greek architecture. So I can see I have a number who are saying that they are following closely, and Sami, I can see you are saying it's excellent. So therefore, I believe the rest of us are also following us uh, closely within this live stream. So again, I want to remind you, if you have any question, the content that we've gone through, just post a comment or your question on the comment section, and I'll be able to respond to any query or any comments that you have so far. Again, we arrive on a technical training channel. If you are not a subscriber, we request that support us so that we are able also to reach many people within this channel, because we deal with many topics within the construction field, and we believe that you could be our ambassador in ensuring that we reach to quite a number of people. Again, within our playlist, we have a number of tutorials that we've uploaded. We invite you to also look at them, watch them, share them with your counterparts, with your friends, so that they can also we can also be able to improve and boost their knowledge within the construction industry. So we will move now to the Greek architecture, and as we discuss Greek architecture, we'll be also comparing it with the Roman made on small bits, and again majorly with the Egyptian, because we want to see how architecture evolved right away from the Egyptian period all the way to the current, or to the current regime that we have of postmodernism. So it's good for us to also keep on referring to the various architecture, so that we can see how architecture evolved from one architectural language to the other. So therefore, again, let me share the Greek architecture presentation, so that we are able to follow. So we are on Greek architecture, and we will discuss concepts and various aspects that are related to Greek architecture, and see how, again, the Greeks impacted the history of architecture, and how architecture evolved as time went by. So therefore, welcome again, and let's see the various concepts and the various points that are related to Greek architecture. Just a minute. I don't know whether I've stopped sharing or we are there. Sorry for the hiccup. I think we are back now. I'll just share again the Greek architecture, so that we move together. So just I've said, we are on Greek architecture. Sorry for the hiccup. We just continue and discuss the various concepts that surround the Greek architecture. So we start with some introductory uh, points on the Greek architecture, and one of them, we are saying that the Greek architecture was primarily religious and expressed their belief. So we'll see a lot of Greek architecture, especially as they conceived their building. Most of them were basically related to their religious beliefs, or the architecture depicted primarily their religious beliefs. We're also saying that secular and domestic architecture resembled the temple architecture, and this established a common aesthetic link among the building. So in Greek, we are seeing a departure from wherever the Egyptians were, how the Egyptians were conceiving their buildings. Because in Greek we are saying that both the secular or the architecture that was not was the domestic architecture and the secular architecture resembled the temple architecture. So the building that we are conceived for public functions, the buildings that were done for domestic purposes, all of them resembled their temple architecture. And we are saying that this established a common aesthetic link amongst the building. So all of them being conceived from the prototype of a, of a temple building, it brought in the aspect of the aesthetic link between the secular buildings, between the domestic building, and of course the temples themselves. So another point is that the building of stone temples in Greek world started in late 6th century BC, and these early temples were of fundamental statement in temple design. Then you are saying that by the 8th century BC, the Greek civilization was in the form of city-states, which were self-governing, but though not politically united, they were common. They were by a common culture. So this is very important as we try to understand the Greek architecture, because you are saying that the way they were organized, or the way the Greek um, country was organized. It was organized in different city states. So we had different cities that were self-governing, but they were not politically united. So politically they were not governed the same way, but they are saying that these different city states were united commonly by culture. Culture was common between these different cities. Again, we are also saying that they had a system that was democratic. Their rule was democratic, and their citadels or the cities were organized around the Acropolis. So they had different. We talked of different cities that now we are saying that they were organized around the Acropolis. Acropolis basically means where the temples were located, and that's where their cities would congregate around that temple. We'd have the marketplace, which is basically known as the agora, and we had the assembly spaces. So all of those spaces would be organized around the temple. Then we are saying that Olympia Delphi and Epidauros developed as meeting places for all the city-states. Olympia Delphi and Epidauros developed as meeting places for all the city-states for common festivals. So Olympia Delphi, Epidauros, they were also city-states, and they evolved as meeting places for the various cities. When they had common festivals, then they would either be done in Olympia Delphi and Epidauros. And actually, that the concept of Olympic definitely came from this aspect. And now, currently, as we know it, the various continents are the ones that would meet in different cities for Olympics. Then you're also saying that the Greeks adapted an alphabet from the Phoenicians, and therefore language and literacy developed rapidly due to that aspect of adopting an alphabet. They were able to communicate their language, and literacy aspects developed developed quite rapidly. We are saying that this also enabled them to express themselves, rationalize thoughts, develop logical philosophies, and attempt even to govern themselves. And you'll see how this aspect of being able to rationalize thought, being able to think or develop philosophy, has how we'll see how this impacted on the architecture. Then again, we are noting and saying that the religious was polytheistic. That is, they also believed in many gods, and the gods became very related to all aspects of Greek life, and this influenced the idea and arrangement of the places of worship. So for them, the places of worship was meant or supposed to be a shelter for the gods and not for the people to get into the uh, building and worship there. So the places or their temples were done to house the gods or to shelter the gods, and then the people would congregate around that temple and they would do their rituals. They would do their worship around the temple. And that's why as we move on, we will see the temples actually were done on raised grounds so that people would gather around the temples or the shelter for the gods and worship there. You're also saying that as much as a city was a political association of families, it also remained as an association around the common worship, and therefore all cities had temples on the Acropolis. Just as I've mentioned, the temple was the reference, and all the other functions, all the other buildings were done around that temple. Uh, Other essentials of Greek cities were places for government, that is civic buildings, marketplaces, agora, recreation, and culture. And we will also see how this plays out even in how they conceived like the recreational spaces, the government spaces, civic buildings, and again even the marketplaces. We'll see how that also went out and played out within the architecture. As I had noted, I had said that the Acropolis was on higher ground where civic architecture gathered uh, around the agora. So therefore, the building, the architecture revolved quite a lot on the temples. Stores, which were initially irregular and later more systematically organized, developed not only the function of the agora, but fulfilling also their function of assembly places and also defining the agora and acting as a composition feature. So we'll see how stores were the meeting places, or stores will basically mean the meeting places. You'll see how originally they were not organized; they were just done in various regions, and would have people meeting them. But again, now we'll see how they were later reorganized to incorporate or to come and interact with the marketplace, the agora, to interact with the marketplace and act as a composition feature. That is fulfilling their function as assembly places and again also defining the marketplace. These forms were their form were erogated portico, and they also acted as an extension of the agora which they faced. At the rear were shops, offices, stores, e.g. uh, e- and later they developed into storage structures due to demand. They are coronated facades giving regularity to the building, and the agora due to the regular rhythm of the architectural elements. So I think this is better explained with a sketch. just as we can see with this sketch. So this is the form of a Greek temple. This shape was the form of a Greek temple, and you are saying that the domestic, the civic buildings were also conceived from the same design or from the same typology of a Greek temple. But for this case, again, we are saying because Tower was a civic building, that is a public building that was meant to act as a meeting assembly space or assembly place. Earlier on, they were done haphazardly. They were not defining any space. They were done individually. But later on, we are saying as time went by, they were organized and they were built in such a way they were able to define the marketplace and again also fulfill their function as meeting places. But again, as time went by, we also saw that at the back they had spaces for storage facilities and the rest. But as time went by, because we are talking of Agora as the market place, their function as assembly places went on declining and they became stores for the market goods. Uh, and that's how the stores were interacting with the marketplace or the agora. Then we talked of the recreational facilities for the Greeks, and we are seeing now architecture now evolving and doing more buildings that are related to other functions. The Greek, we are looking at now the theater, and we are saying that the theater was located in a suitable topographical location because of its size and the desirability to find for finding natural settings which would alleviate construction problems. So in Greek theaters, we are done on sites that were little bit slopy, just to ensure that the theaters were cut within the ground. They are cut within the ground to just demonstrate how a theater would look like. And that uh, would form the theater in Greek civilization. We are saying that again it became very hard for the theaters to be integrated with the towns simply because we needed a slopy ground for the theater to be able to achieve a theater, and therefore it was not very possible to integrate the theaters with the town. Then again, the temple creation, the creation of a shelter for God implied no space for worship, just as I had said earlier, and it rather provided space for ritual, but it was not meant for the congregation. So the temples, as were conceived in Greek, which is a departure from the Egyptian, because in Egyptian the temples were meant for people to go in and worship there. But for the Greek, uh, the temples are done to house the gods, and then people would gather around the temple and worship them. So from the first temple design, they aimed for an external effect, the placing of a structure enclosing an effigy positioned for the worshippers outside the building, which therefore had no internal complexity. So, due to this fact that people are not meant to go into the temples to worship there, so they were not concerned with the internal complexity of those buildings, but they really worked on the external effects and placed more emphasis on the outward look for the temples. Again, we are saying that the early houses for the gods would not differ much from those of man, and domestic architecture was simple using traditional form, that is the megaron. And the megaron would also adopt the same form, just as we've seen with the stoa, just as we've seen with different stoas defining the agora. So that form of a stoa would basically be the form of a megaron. And you are saying that megaron is the house, is the primitive hut for normal people, where people would normally dwell. And again, remember we said the link that this form created between the domestic architecture, the secular architecture, and the temple architecture. And we are saying that this similarity afforded the link between the house of man and the house of God. So that similarity in terms of form brought in the link between the house of God and the house of man. Again, just as we saw with the Roman, Greek also invented a number of columns, what is basically known as the Greek orders. So that's what we will discuss and see how the Greek orders were conceived, how they looked like. And we are saying that the inception of columns made the substitution of stone for timber, led to an architectural development that later enormously influenced the Western world. So we are saying that the inception of columns made the substitution of stone for timber. So we saw a lot of stone construction in Egypt, but again now with the Greek, we are seeing them substituting the columns with timber, and we are saying timber construction was the origin of the Doric and Ionic orders. So we have these two orders, the Doric and Ionic orders, and again the other name for an order is column. So these two columns we are saying that their origin came from timber, and we're also saying that when translated into stone, however, some architectural elements lost their validity, and thereafter Doric architecture ceased to be concerned with structure as such, but rather adapted the medium of structure as a means of abstract composition of the building and its part. So again, as much as time also went by, they also started again employing more of the stonework, and the Doric were again conceived from Doric and the Ionic orders were conceived from the stones, and we are saying that when this happened, some of the timber members that we had done earlier lost their validity as structural members, but were used as for aesthetic purposes. So these are illustrations of how a Doric order would look like, and we are saying, just as we saw with the with the Greek, we said the Roman, not the Roman, sorry, the Egyptian, they had the capital, we have the shaft, and we have the base. So the Roman columns were basically uh, of this nature, and this is what we are referring to as the Doric order, where we would have the stylobate as the base, we would have the shaft with the grooves, and the capital, which also contained a few of decorations, what you call the metopes, the triglyphs, and this basically also contained what we call the entablature. And the entablature would consist of the cornice, the frieze, and the architrave. So the cornice is the topmost part of the column. Uh, Lower it, we had the frieze, and within the frieze we had the metopes and the triglyphs, and then we have the architrave above the capital, and this is the form of the Doric order, and we are saying that the fruiting is this is a section just to show how the Quran was conceived or how the grooves were done. Then we also have the Ionic order. The Ionic order again is we will also look at them and we see the difference. One of them was render taller than the other. Uh, the Ionic order again has the three parts: the base, the shaft, and the capital. And this is how the Doric order was conceptualized. Then, as we move on, we'll also discuss the third order, which is known as the Corinthian order. And this is a typical detail of a Corinthian order. Again, you had base, you had shaft, which was tall and slender, fluted, tempered with entasis, with the grooves, and then it had the capital was conceived from a plant that is known as the acarindas. So the acarindas leaves would demonstrate or were depicted within the capital of the Corinthian order. So we progress and see a number of try to describe these columns so that we also are able to understand better and how they were used within the Greek architecture. So rising imagery from the stylobate, we talked of the stylobate as the base of the column with clear-cut shallow fluting introduced a powerful vertical thrust, the fluting emphasizing the roundness of the shaft following continuously uh, developed convexity. That is the entasis. It's just a description of how the stylobate, the base, and the shaft was conceived, and again up to the capital. So the entasis was a device for correcting optical illusion, counteracting the hollow appearance which is seen in the straight-sided columns, as well as imparting a sense of strength. So entasis is the grooving of the shaft, just as we saw uh, from the section under the Doric order. And we are saying that the fluting was meant to correct optical illusion, to create strength, optical illusion, to counteracting the hollow effect of the column, especially when you are dealing with a round column, and then also imparting a sense of strength for the column, and that's why the entasis was done, or the columns were grooved, just to ensure that to correct optical illusion, counteracting the hollow appearance which is seen in a straight-sided column. Then again, we also noted that above the capital was the entablature, which composed of three elements. That is the architrave, the frieze, and again with the frieze, we said, and within the frieze we have the metopes and we have the triglyphs, and then finally we had the cornice. So just as we saw, we have the cornice, the frieze. The frieze, we have the methods, and we have the triglyphs, and then we have the architrave above the capital. So all of this had origin developed from Tiber prototypes. The architrave was a beam spanning from column to column, a strong horizontal member, plain and uncomplicated. So we were saying earlier on, columns were done from timber prototypes, but as time went by, they started doing them with stones. But when the columns were being done out of timber, we are saying that the arch tree was spanning from one column to the other, which was a strong member, plain and complicated, plain and uncomplicated. But later on, as we had said earlier, when they started doing the columns with stones, then these adjective lost meaning in terms of structural aspect. In terms of structural aspect, the frieze was composed of triglyphs and metopes. We've seen that triglyphs represented in stone the ends of crossbeam and therefore were structural in origin, while metopes were originally breaks crossing the gap between the beams. So we had the beams that would run. Remember, these beams would maybe support the roof, and then the triglyphs would represent the edges of those cross beams, and the metopes would just be bricks to, to cross the gap that were between the triglyphs. Between the triglyphs. So again, we're also saying that triglyphs used to have structural purposes, but in the aesthetic implications of the Doric order, they expressed vertical support, restating the frieze after the interval of the horizontal architrave, the vertical emphasis of the column, and the rhythm alternating with metopes provided stability in the horizontal direction. So we are saying later on, as stonework started to take over, the triglyphs and the metopes became aesthetical the way they were conceived within the concept. So again, we are saying that the overhanging cornice restated the horizontality of the stylobate and literally capped the sequence of contrasting vertical and horizontal elements of the two planes. So the cornice again would reinstate the stylobate. Remember, the stylobate is the base of the column. Then again, we're also saying that the complete unified balance of the effect produced by the colonnade depended on this arrangement, demanding dimensional accuracy and mathematical exactitude in the assembly of precision of line and molding. So actually what we are saying in this aspect is that the way columns and the way Greek approached the architecture, they were more concerned with precision, the way moldings were done, the way the entases, the grooving were done, were informed heavily by mathematics and calculations. But again, as much as this would form the basis of the element, we are saying that wherever that either a column would look visually not correct, they would just correct it even if mathematically it would have been correct. And that is what we saw earlier when we talked of optical illusion. So we are also saying that Dorian Greeks in Greek and Ionian Greeks along the coast of Asia Minor interpreted and expressed the solutions of a common problem in their individual way, and the heritage of the century of vernacular building. So we have the Dorian Greek coming up with the Doric order, the Ionian Greeks bringing in the aspect of the Ionic order, and you are saying this is an expression of the vernacular building, expressing each community expressing the architecture and having parameters that or elements that would define the architecture. We are also saying that the new way we are to become the Doric and Ionic style of architecture, and they were adopted in majorly the Greece world. But we're also saying that there is the other order, the third order, that is the Corinthian order, which were developed much later after the two orders had been employed within the Greek architecture. Then we also look at building technique within the Greek architecture. And we are saying that Greek building technique, particularly in stone masonry, was complicated, and they built some of their structures entirely without mortar. This was made possible only by a high degree of accuracy in cutting and joining the blocks of stone. We're also saying that they also employed bronze and iron dowel pins, which held the blocks together. We talk of the art of cutting stone right away from the Egyptian architecture. We are seeing the same continuation within the Greek use of masonry, use of stone to conceive their buildings, the art of cutting stone and joining them together. But again, for them, we are seeing an advancement where they are using bronze dowels and iron dowels to stick their stones together in order to conceive buildings. So we are also saying that the architecture was never very bold and or very imaginative, rather more braided logic and sensitivity in a beautiful, harmonious tranquility that was without parallel in history. And maybe we will see this when we discuss the Athens Acropolis, and we'll see how precision was evident within the work. So now let us look at the Athens Acropolis and see how the components of the Athens Acropolis. Acropolis, we said, is where the temples were done. So we are talking of the Temple of Athena, or the Athens, the temple that was done at Athens by UNESCO. So we are saying that this Acropolis dominates surrounding events, and the architectural composition was molded to that end. Access to the uneven plateau was visible at only one point, and here the propria was placed. On the highest level of the temple of Athena, that is uh, Parthenon, was placed. Two more architectural structures completed the arrangement. To the north of Parthenon was the shrine known as the Erechtheion, and the statue of Athena formed the visual pivot of the composition. So, with other Acropolis, we'll see a number of components within this temple. One of them is Propria. We'll talk of Parthenon. We'll talk of Erechtheion, and we'll see how these compositions were organized together to depict or to demonstrate the temple of Athena. And you'll see how culture, how religious concepts uh, influenced the design of the temple of Athena. So we start with the first one, that is the propria, and we are saying that this was a ceremonial gateway facing out to the city. Remember, we said that the acropolis or the temples were done on a higher ground, and the surrounding or the temple would be surrounded by cities, dwelling of people, and the rest. So therefore, we are saying that Propria was the ceremonial gateway facing out to the city. Its form was complicated by the sloping site of its and its appropriatory monumental size, and these problems were brilliantly solved. So we are saying that the Propria was complicated due to the sloping site of where the Acropolis was positioned, and again the size of this propria also made it quite complicated. But we will see how the Greeks were able, or the architect was able to solve that problem. We are saying that the difference in levels between the Doric portico was effected within the depth of the building by use of Ionic columns flanking the central passageway, and ingenious solution derived from the more slender proportion of the Ionic order. So we are saying the architect or the designer was able to solve this aspect of complicated site by use of both the Ionic and the Coram and the Doric orders to compensate each other in terms of height. We're also saying that the propria formed a unique frame through which to perceive the Erechtheion and the Parthenon. So Erechtheion and Parthenon are the other composition of the Athens Acropolis, and one would view them from the propria. So the propria would form a unique frame through which you would perceive both the Erechtheion and the Parthenon. Again, we are also saying that perspective alters at every move through a spacious complex of columns of changing levels, in which the ordering of architecture was arranged with mastery. So again, through the propria and the way the columns, the Ionic and the Doric orders were utilized, that enables the perspective of the Erechtheion, the perspective of Parthenon to change, or the perspective of the whole complex to change from one point to the other. Again, we are also saying that variety was achieved within order, rightness of the masses. It was an enclosure and penetration of space which was unique. So that is the propria, which you are saying that is the ceremonial gateway facing out to the city. Then we have the Parthenon. Parthenon is the other component of the Athens Acropolis. And we are saying that from the propria, the view of the Parthenon is of the rear. So from the propria, you would view the Parthenon on its rear. Its entrance faced the east, so that flank or the side of the building had to be traversed before a right turn to face the east front of the entrance. So from the propria, you would see the rear or the back side of the Parthenon, and then for you now to be able to see, or to see the entrance, to see the or to see the entrance of the Parthenon, you had to traverse the side of the Parthenon, and then you take a right turn to see the front face of the Parthenon. Again, we are saying that the front side of the Parthenon had 8 columns, which was a departure from the conventional Doric 6, the effect of which was to increase the width and broaden the proportion of the width to the length. So again, we are saying that in Parthenon, the departure from the Doric 6. Doric is they are the columns that are employed within the temple architecture, the domestic architecture, where they will do 6 Dorics. But now within the Parthenon, we are seeing a departure from that, and they are doing eight columns. The Doric order was subjected to incredible refinement, which further added to its unique in design. Care, incredible precision, and disregard of expense marked the achievement, and was reflected through a tradition of building stimulated and controlled by mathematics, visual sensitivity, and other exploitation of superb building materials. So these are some of the characteristics within the Greek architecture. We are talking of utilization of a lot of care, incredible precision. They also disregarded the expense of the work that they were doing because they needed to come up with elements that were quite incredible, were quite visual. They were controlled by mathematics. They had visual sensitivity, and that's what enabled them to be able to conceive this building that is regarded as a masterpiece within the Greek architecture. So again, we are seeing that the fine precision which made it possible demanded perfection in quality and sensitivity. So we've seen how they are relying on mathematics, they are relying on calculations, enabled them to be precise on whatever they were doing. But again, we also say that where they felt that mathematics and calculations were giving them optical illusions, they would still correct that to ensure that whatever was perceived by the eye looked right and was proportional. Within the Parthenon, we have the naos, which we are saying that this is where the statue of Athena is housed. We are saying that a rear chamber was included, separated from the naos, and entered from the rear portico. Again, that portico now would house the would house or that portico would be the one that would house the temple of Athena, or what you are referring to as the naos, because you are saying that the naos was created to house the great statue of Athena. So again, we are talking of the classical sculpture also reached its climax in Parthenon based on myths closely associated with Athena and Athenians. And we are saying that the Parthenon was therefore, in effect, an embodiment of the synthesis composition of Doric and Ionic culture. So we are saying that these two cultures, the Ionic and the Doric and the Ionic cultures, were came to fruition at the design of Parthenon. Then finally, we have Erechtheion as the last component of the Athens Acropolis, and under Erechtheion, we are saying that it was the Erechtheion seating was determined by religious and meteorological association rather than the requirement of the architectural composition, and the uneven ground added problem to the complexity of designing the shrine, which was dedicated to three deities. So we are saying the way Erechtheion was conceived was majorly influenced by their religious and meteorological associations rather than whatever principles of architecture would have dictated at that particular time. But their religious and their meteorological association determined how Erechtheion was conceived. So again, we are saying that the Erechtheion is oddly asymmetrical, and the main body of the temple is naos, which with porticos at the east end, on the north and the south face at different levels, and a fourth portico on the west end, considerably above the ground. So Erechtheion is composed of majorly four porticos. Portico at the east end, north and south face, which are at different levels, and of course a fourth portico. A fourth portico is a portico that is hanging on the air, is not sitting on any ground. That was done at the west end of Erechtheion. Then you're also saying that the small south portico is supported by caryatids, uh, that is columns were done resembling figures of women, which we arranged in columnar arrangement corresponding with the north porticos. Again, we're also saying that the orders are ionic, and the coronated porticos face away from Parthenon. Only the caryatid porch face across towards the Parthenon. So the only porch that is facing towards the Parthenon is the one that was done using the caryatid columns, and we are saying that is the small portico, the south portico, which we said was done is a false portico that was done above the ground. So we are also saying that the Rechideion was a decorative feature of the Acropolis and also a masterpiece of the Greek creation. So it also was done with the aspect or the objective of ensuring that the temple of Athena got the appeal or got the aesthetical appeal of the composition, because you are seeing that it was also done as an objective of as a decorative feature of the Acropolis. Then again, you are saying that the buildings of the Acropolis were the supreme architectural achievement of the supreme city of Greece at the summit of its wealth and power. Because remember, we said for them to be able to achieve precision and conceive buildings that were of high standard, they disregarded the aspect of expense, and therefore they were able to achieve buildings that were very precise in nature and had stood the test of time until uh, they were demolished. So therefore, wish to stop at that. We've been able to look at various aspects within the history of architecture. We started with the various forces that influence architecture of a given society. Then we've looked at various concepts around the Egyptian architecture, and finally the various concepts in Greek architecture. And that is what we wanted to cover by the end of this stream. So I wish to thank you greatly for following up and for being with me within this live stream. Thank you very much. I'll just pull down the presentation so that I'll see in case there is any comment that requires to respond to. But for now, I can't see any comments, so I wish everything is well. But again, if you still want to post a comment, you can do that in our comment section. So again, this live stream will again be available on our live section within the technical training channel. So I wish to welcome you later on in case there are concepts that maybe I've gone through over a little bit fast. You can still watch it again on our live section. So as we wind up, I wish to thank you very much for following and being there. Again, if you are not one of our subscribers, kindly subscribe so that you can support us to reach more people and to be able to develop more content. You can also tell us where you wish us to work on, or to areas that you'd like us to feature on in this channel. Otherwise, I wish you all the best. God bless you for being with me in this live stream. Thank you. God bless you.